No, I'm not a philosopher. I would actually like to tell you a story that took place in the time of Gautam Siddhartha Buddha, the Buddha. The story goes that there is a blind man that lives in that town, and he's a very argumentative guy, very logical, very rational in his argumentation. So one day, he happened to come across Buddha's disciples. And he says to Buddha's disciples, "You guys talk about this light. What is this light? If light actually exists, throw it on the ground so I could hear it." And now Buddha's disciples are perplexed by this argument. So the blind man says, "Okay, fine. If you don't want to throw it on the ground, bring it close to my nose so I could smell it." Now again, Buddha's disciples are confounded by this. So the blind man says, "Okay, fine. At least put it on my tongue so I could taste light." And now Buddha's disciples are just bewildered, puzzled by this blind man. Now, logically, this blind man has defeated Buddha's disciples. Buddha's disciples, these are not just some Tom, Dick, and Harry off the street. It's like learning Jeet Kune Do from Bruce Lee. They've learned consciousness from Buddha. They've been defeated by a blind man. So Buddha's disciples, what they decide to do, they're like, let's take this blind man to Buddha. Buddha will set this blind man straight. Buddha is this super duper conscious being who has all the answers in the world. So they reach Buddha and they explain the whole thing that just happened, the whole scenario. And Buddha looks at his disciples in a kind of a disgust. And he says, "You idiots, you should know better to argue with a blind man. You've turned the poor guy into a logician, and tomorrow he'll become a philosopher, even worse. Take him to a doctor and fix his eyes. He's missing a sense. He's nonsense." It just happened to be that Buddha had his own personal physician. So he sent the blind man to his personal physician. And the physician says, this is not too much of a problem. He has a layer of film on his eyes. If that film is removed, he'll be able to see. 5-6 months later, the blind man comes running towards Buddha, dancing in the streets in profound joy. And he touches the feet of Buddha in gratitude and says, "Thank you. Thank you for not arguing with me. Now I understand this was not a logical, philosophical question. This was an existential problem. And in fact, Buddha was the first existentialist, not an existentialist like John Paul Sartre, Martin Buber, Soren Kierkegaard, Karl Jaspers, Albert Camus. These people were just philosophizing about existentialism. Buddha would not give you a sermon on H2O. He would give you the water so you can quench your thirst. Buddha was not a philosopher. Buddha vehemently opposed philosophy. He was arguing against the Hindu Brahmins, the philosophers, the scholars, the learned men, the knowledgeable men of his days. They would come to argue against him, and he would just utterly defeat them, obliterate them. They were pygmies before him. They became his disciples. So, to be a Buddhist is to be a philosopher. Buddhism is a philosophy, but Buddha was not a philosopher. So be Buddha-like. Buddha was a true master, not a teacher. The distinction has to be made very clear. A teacher is somebody that gives you outformation. I don't even call it information, because information means something that has formed in you in formation. A teacher just teaches you whatever the society conditionings are, the outside, the outformation. It's not your insight. It's learned, it's knowledge. In your, like, you know how people talk about the inner eye, the insight? It's not your insight. So a master, a true master, is not a teacher. A teacher can give you outformation at best, not even information. And a master gives you transformation. And that's all that matters.